Hello, beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes to inspire your spirit. And you can learn more at my website, illuminatingsouls.com. But for now, the angels and I are here to help you rest and hopefully fall asleep. If you're new to the podcast, let me share with you how it works and what you can expect. So I've been listening to sleep podcasts for many years now. They are part of my self-care routine, and I love them so much that this is why I have created this for you. And this podcast is a mashup of sorts of two of my favorite ways of taking care of myself, working with the angels, and sleep podcasts. Perhaps it is an unlikely combination, but it is one that really delights my heart and I hope works for you. So back to what you can expect. The episode will be about an hour in length, and I make them that long because as a listener of sleep podcasts, I prefer longer episodes because I feel less pressure to hurry up and fall asleep. The first part of the episode will be chatting like we are now. I'll be bringing in the angels and sharing angel love with you. And then the second part of the episode, I will be sharing a bedtime story with you. And the content for the bedtime stories shifts and changes. Sometimes I will read to you something that is in the public domain. Other times I might share with you a story from my own life. I try to mix it up a little bit, so you have a variety of episodes to choose from. What I find helpful is I crawl into bed. Bed is an important part of sleep for me. I do not like to sleep anywhere. That is not my bed. So I'm not someone who enjoys falling asleep on the couch. So the first part of my sleep cycle is I get into bed and I cozy on up. I pull up my blankets just so. I sleep with lots of blankets and pillows. And I put in my earbuds, so I do fall asleep with earbuds in, and I cue up a podcast. And I typically turn the volume down lower than I would usually use if I were trying to actually listen to something like an audiobook. So I turn it down so I can hear it, but not so loud that it demands my attention. And then what I find is the narrative of the sleep podcast gives my consciousness a place to gently focus as I transition from wakeful consciousness into sleep. And more often than not, I'm out in the first 20 minutes. I was just saying to my husband this morning, I have been listening to Anne of Green Gables because I love that book. And the podcast I'm listening to is The Sleepy Bookshelf. It's one of my favorites to listen to. I love the woman's voice who narrates it, and there is a certain chapter she is reading in the episode I have been listening to. And I have played it the past 2 nights, and I still can't tell you what happens in the chapter because I fall asleep. And that's really hopefully what this is going to do for you. You may listen to the podcast during the day because you want to hear it, and that is fine. You know me. I honor however you are guided to use the sleep podcast. I know some of you listen to it during the day to help keep you company. But if you are wanting to try to use it as a podcast to put you to sleep, those are my suggestions. Pick an episode. Let it be okay that you might not be awake by the end. And if you are, you can always queue up another episode and let that one keep you company. And you may find that certain kinds of episodes work better for you to put you to sleep. For instance, if I'm reading to you from a book, that might work better for you versus when I'm telling you a story from my life. You might find that more entertaining. Not that I think I'm terribly entertaining, but you know, the narrative is different. The rhythm is different. So you have my blessing in seeing what works best for you. And if you do find that you enjoy the podcast, if you would consider leaving a review, because they really help, or even better, sharing about the podcast with a friend. We are growing the podcast through word of mouth. And so anything you can do to help spread the word would be greatly appreciated. And also, I want to tell you, I love hearing from you. So if the podcast is helping you, if there's something about it that you like, if you have a favorite episode, feel free to drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. It brings me great joy. But for now, let's focus on helping you relax so you can sleep. And I'm going to call the angels in to be with us. So go ahead and get comfortable in your body and snuggle on in whatever way makes you comfortable. And take a few deep breaths in and out, just letting your body know that it has permission to relax. And I'm going to bring the angels in. They are already here, but I love calling them or inviting them forward. Makes my heart happy. So I gratefully share this with you. Beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here, and I am so grateful for your presence. And I am so grateful for your invitation to be present here right now with you. As I remember that it is not so much about us inviting you forward as you are inviting us into this sanctuary of divine love. So angels, I ask that you amplify this beautiful, loving presence for each of our beloveds listening to this broadcast. Angels, I ask that you clear away anything that does not belong to us, clearing our energy fields through the heart of God, and sending healing light through all dimensions of time. And angels, I am so grateful for this opportunity to gather together and shine love upon each of the beautiful souls listening to this broadcast. Dear ones, I thank God for the gift of you. To each of you listening right now, I say thank you for being you. You are a blessing here on earth. You are a beautiful, bright soul. And you help make this world a better place. So just take a deep breath in and allow the angels to bring to you calming, soothing energy. With your permission, the angels are filling the space you are in with soft, pink light. And this light is filled with love that has been calibrated just for you. The angels know what is in your heart. They know your prayers. They know the circumstances present in your life right now. And they bring you gentle, soothing, healing light. So just breathe it in. Allow yourself to receive waves of understanding and compassion. You know, we know that life has an ebb and flow. We have good days and we have not so good days. And wherever you are on that continuum of life, the angels bring you love. One of the things that I appreciate so much about the work that I do, I get to see you in the brightness of your spirit. I get to witness you in your wholeness and your sparks of light. And I also see you in your humanness. And I have to say, this makes it so easy to love upon you. And I love that I am one of those voices who gets to help you remember who you are as a divine being in human form. You are not a person with a soul. You are a soul having a human experience. There is a bigness, a fullness, a wholeness that is the very essence and foundational truth of who you are. And as you connect with it, it will help to bring you balance and goodness and inspiration. Because you are remarkable. You have gifts within you that are truly a blessing in this world. And you don't have to become famous or work with thousands of people. Maybe one of your gifts is you make the best ever banana bread. And there are people in your life who feel the essence of home when they get to taste your banana bread. I think in the modern age, we get so caught up with having to be famous or super extra special. And I think we're all super extra special, but maybe in ways that we're not famous for. My husband has been growing a summer garden, and if you've ever grown tomatoes, unless you can your own tomatoes, it's been my experience that we typically always have way more tomatoes than we know what to do with because we do not can or jar our tomatoes. And it brings my husband and I great joy to share our bounty of tomatoes with our neighbors and our friends. There are 1,000 ways that you can shine your light in this world, and you do. So maybe you share from your garden like we did. Or maybe you make the best banana bread. Or maybe you're someone who knows how to comfort someone who's in a place of deep grief. Do you know how rare that is? Most people have no idea how to meet someone in a place of deep grief. And if you're someone who knows how to hold for that, you are extraordinary. So I want to invite you to take a deep breath in and recognize how beautiful you are. You are a source of love and comfort in this world. And I affirm you have a creative spirit that is ready to bubble up to the surface. Whether you write or take photographs, whether you paint or you tell stories, whether you walk a different way every time you go for your evening walk because you like to see what flowers are blossoming in each person's garden. You're remarkable. And I'm so happy that I am someone who gets to know this about you. So take a big breath in and release. Release the voices of self-judgment. Release all the shoulds and the have-tos, at least for right now. You can always gather them up again later. And for now, simply be in this place where the angels and I can acknowledge and love you because you are worthy of love right now. Right now, you, your beingness, your beautiful body, your imperfections, your awesomeness, your tenderness, all of you, everything that you are is worthy of love. So just breathe. And if that's hard for you to accept, just pretend I'm right. Just let me be right for the next little while. And the angels are shining this beautiful, vibrant love upon you. There's healing for you in this love. This love is here to help you come into your wholeness and the beauty of your spirit. And I am so grateful for the gift of you. I am so grateful you found your way to this message so that you can be reminded of who you are. So allow your body and consciousness to drift off into sleep if that is your intention. And while you do, I'm going to tell you a story. So tonight I have an interesting book I'm going to read to you. I love reading diaries and travel logs from the past because they give us a glimpse of what places were like before they had been modernized. And so this is a book that's called Overland Journey, New York to San Francisco in the summer of 1859 by Horace Greeley, and it was published in 1860. I haven't read the whole book, and I know even before I read it, this book will in all likelihood be problematic because in 1859, this would have been the perspective of a white man traveling across the country with this sense of discovery. And you can't really discover a land that has already been inhabited for thousands of years, and there's a lot of difficulty. I'm trying to use gentle words because it's a sleep podcast. That's a lot of darkness to that period of time as well. That I'm not going to address here because, again, it's a sleep podcast. But I just want you to know that as I read this book, I don't think it's all sunshine and roses. I am going to read to you, though, a chapter about the trip this gentleman took from Sacramento, which at that point was a mining town, to Yosemite, which I just find that fascinating because things weren't built up then, and you have had to take the journey by stagecoach. And as someone who moved from Chicago to Los Angeles, and I have flown across the country many, many times, and I always had great wonder about the people who made that journey before there were airplanes, even before there were railroads. I've always been mesmerized by that, and so it is with that sense of curiosity that I share with you this gentleman's experience. And before we get started, I'll also say, especially for those of you who might be Mormon or have Mormon roots, there is an interview with Brigham Young in this book. I haven't read it. I just scrolled past it and I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm going to have to go back and read it. But we're going to start here. I'm terrible at Roman numerals. Let's see, XXV and then 31. So that would be 28, chapter 28. I'm impressed with myself that I know that. This chapter is called California, the Yosemite, Bear Valley, California, August 14th, 1859. I left Sacramento on Monday morning last, traveling by stage to Stockton, 48 miles nearly due south, crossing the Mokelumne. I should know how to pronounce that, but I don't, so I'm going to just do my best. The Mokelumne, and keeping first the Sacramento and then the San Joaquin a few miles on our right, and Mount Diablo conspicuous still further west. We traversed a level, fertile plain sparsely wooded near the rivers, a plain which should be, but is not yet, densely peopled and very productive. There are some fine orchard gardens near the cities, and might well be many, but a good part of the intermediate country is unenclosed, and the residue mainly devoted by large ranches or loose and slovenly cattle husbandry, and in less degree to the growing of small grain, wheat, and barley. The stubble indicates good crops, but there is not a sufficient area devoted to them. Uncertainty of land titles, that is a paramount curse of California, is assigned, and as the cause of this inadequacy of cultivation, which I trust is not to continue. And I will just say, it won't. It will all become developed and will become farmland. So Stockton is situated on a bayou of the San Joaquin at the head of the regular steamboat navigation on that river, which makes it the third or fourth city of California with 15,000 inhabitants and an extensive carrying trade. The better dwellings are in good part surrounded by fine gardens, well filled with delicious fruit. In some of them, the primitive, wide-spreading oaks have been preserved, giving them an aspect of beauty and coolness most grateful to the traveler recently arrived from the plains. Stockton has the state insane asylum and a very interesting commencement of a cabinet of natural history. Better still, she has an artesian well 1,000 feet deep, bored at a cost of $10,000, and pouring forth a copious and unfailing stream some feet above the surface of the earth. Deep as it is, it penetrates only successive strata of what appears to be alluvial deposit, never touching bedrock. Artesian wells are becoming common in California, and I trust are yet to play an important part in the development and extension not only of her agriculture, but also of her mining industry, now crippled, especially in the South, by the general dearth of water. I have a suspicion that all the water hitherto obtained by canals or ditches so expensively constructed could have been procured far cheaper by digging artesian wells, which, however multiplied, could hardly fail at the foot of the Sierra Nevada to strike copious fountains at no unreasonable depth. And I will have to say that it is really interesting listening to that now living in California with our drought and water challenges and water rights. And yeah, it certainly has played a huge role and continues to play a huge role in the management of California. So we'll continue. I left Stockton next morning in a carriage with a friend who proposed to go through to Bear Valley, 75 miles, before sleeping, a feat which I doubted my ability of any span of livery horses to accomplish. My doubt was misplaced. Good horses, an early start, careful, considerate driving, frequent watering, and the dry, bracing air of California carried us through by little after 10 p.m., and our team would readily have gone 10 miles further had we required it. I judged that 60 miles of just such roads would have been as hard a drive in any state east of the Rocky Mountains. Our general course this day was east by south, passing mainly over moderately undulating prairie, of very unequal but generally indifferent fertility, and crossing successfully at intervals of about 20 miles the small rivers Stanislaus, Tuolumne, and Merced, all flowing from the mountains westward into the San Joaquin, and all rendered turbid by the mining operations in progress on their banks or in their beds. The Stanislaus runs through a belt of rather light and thin oak, some 2 or 3 miles wide. The others have a few scattering oaks, and that is all. There is considerable husbandry, mainly of the ranching order near Stockton and along the rivers aforesaid, but very little industry of any kind on the naked prairies between them, and not a drop of running water, except perhaps a spring or two under some of the low hills which have a tolerably steep side respectively. There are very few deep holes in some of the winter water courses at which cattle still find drink, though of a bad quality. One settler from Massachusetts who lives mainly by cattle growing informed us that he came around Cape Horn 8 or 10 years since, has now about 90 head of cattle, which are fast increasing, and intends to erect a windmill this winter by whose aid he will be able to have a good garden at once and a fine fruit orchard within a few years. Windmills located over wells or other reservoirs of water, which they raise for use in irrigation, are very common in Stockton and are rapidly going up throughout Middle California. He has to go 7 miles for his fuel, fencing stuff, etc. on the Stanislaus. His nearest neighbors on the road we traveled are some 5 to 10 miles distant, but I believe he has nearer. He is doubtless richer here than in Massachusetts, but I cannot realize that his family are happier or more favorably situated for mental and moral improvement, there being no school within reach, and the children depending for instruction on their New England mother alone. But their children will not have New England mothers, and what then? I fear this cattle ranching with long intervals between the ranches is destined to half barbarize many thousands of the next generation, whom schools can scarcely reach, and to whom the sound of the church-going bell will be a stranger. Most of the agriculturalists of this region, however, came here from Missouri, Arkansas, or Texas. Many of them from Missouri or Arkansas by way of Texas, and do not seem to regard common schools as essential to civilized life. We crossed the Merced 60 miles from Stockton. All these rivers are crossing by toll bridges or ferry charges, $1 each per wagon, just before sunset. And now our road became rugged and bad as we rose the first of the foothills of the Sierra. Thus far we had seen few traces of mining save the muddy-colored waters of the river. But 7 miles further brought us the Quartzburg in the center of a nearly washed-out valley of gold-bearing gravel, and thence our way led 7 miles further over a far higher foothill into Bear Valley, where we found friends and grateful rest. The next day I devoted to an examination of Colonel Fremont's mines and works, of which I may speak hereafter, but I must now hurry on to the Yosemite. I left Bear Valley 2 hours later than was fit, at 6 a.m. on Thursday, resolved to push through to my immediate destination that night. My friend had preceded me betimes to Mariposa, 12 miles on our way to complete preparations for the trip. But we were unluckily delayed here again by misapprehensions in the pre-engagement of animals for attendance on a camp meeting, so that it was high noon when we reached the end of the wagon road, 12 miles below Mariposa, where the saddle is the only resource. While it is still nearly 40 miles, many of them steep ones, to the Yosemite Fall. Everyone assured us that to get through that day was impossible. Yet I had no more time to give to the journey and must try. My friend is a good rider, while I can barely ride at all, not having spent 5 hours on horseback, save in my visit to the Kansas gold mines within the last 30 years. But the 2 gentlemen from Mariposa, who accompanied and guided us, knew all about the journey that we didn't, which is saying a great deal. So we pressed buoyantly, confidently on. Hussey's steam sawmill, where we mounted, or rather I did, for the rest had done so before, marks pretty fairly the division between the oaks of the lower and the firs of the higher elevations, though the two, of course, melt into each other. As we rose gradually but steadily, the white soon faded out, then the black, and the last the live oak, through the genuineness of this last is disputed, while the yellow pitch and sugar pines, cedars and balsam firs became more numerous and stately, till they had at length the ground almost wholly to themselves, save that the manzanito and other shrubs, mostly evergreens, also clustered on nearly every opening among the trees. There is little or no precipice or bare rock for miles, and we rose along the southern face of the ridge overlooking the Chochilla Valley until we seemed to have half California spread out before us like a map. Our range of vision extended south to the Tule Lake, or immense morass in which the San Joaquin has its source, and west to the Coast Range, which alone barred the Pacific Ocean from our view. Still rising, we wound gradually around the peak of our first mountain, through a slight depression or pass, and soon looked off upon the valley of the South Fork of the Merced, which opened for miles north and east of us. On this side, the descent is far steeper, and we traversed for miles a mere trace along the side of the mountain where a misstep must have landed us at least 1,000 feet below. In time, this too was left behind, and we descended fitfully and tortuously the east end of the mountain to the South Fork, whereon 16 miles from Hussey's, and but 5 miles from the big trees of Mariposa, we halted for rest and food. Before 6, we were again in the saddle, crossing the fork and winding up over another mountain northward, with a precipitous descent of at least 2,000 feet beside us for a mile or so. A steep ascent of half a mile carried us over the divide, whence we descended very rapidly to Alder Creek at the northern base. Following up this creek over a succession of steep pitches interleaved with more level patches, we bade adieu to daylight at Grizzly Flat, a spot noted for encounters with the monarch of our American forests, and thence crossed a ridge to Summit Meadows, a succession of mainly narrow grassy levels which wind in and out among the promontories of more or less shattered granite, which make down from the mountain peaks on either side, but pursue a generally eastward direction to pour their tiny tribute into the great chasm. Our route led us 6 or 8 times across these meadows, which were often so boggy as to require a very nice choice of footing, and intermediately across the generally wooded promontories which deflected the probably continuous meadow into what seemed to us many, until we stood at length, about 10 p.m., on the brink of the awful abyss, and halted a moment to tighten girths and take breath for the descent. And I just have to say, I love the way he writes. I feel like I'm with him on the journey. And I've always been mesmerized by those who made this journey on horseback. I've only made it by car or plane, so we'll continue. And here, let me renew my tribute to the marvelous bounty and beauty of the forests of this whole mountain region. The Sierra Nevadas lack the glorious glaciers, the frequent rains, the rich verdure, the abundant cataracts of the Alps, but they far surpass them. They surpass any other mountains I ever saw in the wealth and grace of their trees. Look down from almost any of their peaks, and your range of vision is filled, bounded, satisfied by what may be termed a tempest-tossed sea of evergreens, filling every upland valley, covering every hillside, crowning every peak but the highest with their unfading luxuriance. that I saw during this day's travel many hundreds of pines 8 feet in diameter, with cedars at least 6 feet. I am confident, and there were miles after miles of such and smaller trees of like genus standing as thick as they could grow, steep mountain sides allowing them to grow rank above rank without obstructing each other's sunshine seem peculiarly favorable to the production of these serviceable giants. But the summit meadows are peculiar in their heavy fringe of balsam fir of all sizes, from those barely 1 foot high to those hardly less than 200, their branches surrounding them in collars, their extremities gracefully bent down by the weight of winter snows, making them here, I am confident, the most beautiful trees on earth. The dry promontories which separate these meadows are also covered with a species of spruce, which is only less graceful than the fir aforesaid. I never before enjoyed such a tree feast as on this wearing, difficult ride. Descent into the Yosemite is only practicable at 3 points. One near the head of the valley, where a small stream makes it from the direction of the main ridge of the Sierra, down which there is a trail from the vicinity of Water River, Utah. A trail practicable, I believe, for men on foot only. The other 2 lead in near the outlet from Mariposa and Coulterville, respectively on opposite banks of the Merced, and are practicable for sure-footed mules or horses. We, of course, made our descent by the Mariposa Trail on the south side of the Little River, which here escapes from the famous valley by a canyon which water can safely, if at all, traverse, being shut in by lofty precipices and broken by successive falls. My friends insisted that I should look over the brink into the profound abyss before clambering down its side, but I, apprehending giddiness and feeling the need of steady nerves, firmly declined. So we formed line again and moved on. The night was clear and bright, as all summer nights in this region are. The atmosphere cool, but not really cold. The moon had risen before 7 o'clock and was shedding so much light as to bother us in our forest path, where the shadow of a standing pine looked exceedingly like the substance of a fallen one, and many semblances were unreal and misleading. It was often hard to realize that the dark, narrow, current-like passage to the left was our trail, and not the winding, broader, moonlighted opening on the right. The safest course was to give your horse a free rein, and trust to his sagacity or self-love for keeping the trail. As we descended by zigzags, the north face of the all but perpendicular mountain, our moonlight soon left us, or was present only by reflection from the opposite cliff. Soon the trail became at once so steep, so rough, and so tortuous that we all dismounted. But my attempt at walking proved a miserable failure. I had been riding with a bad stirrup, which barely admitted the toes of my left foot, and continual pressure on these had sprained and swelled them, so that walking was a positive torture. I persevered in the attempt till my companions insisted on my remounting, and thus floundering slowly to the bottom by steady effort, we descended the 3 miles, 4,000 feet perpendicular in 2 hours, and stood at night by the rushing, roaring waters of the Merced. That first full, deliberate gaze up the opposite height, can I ever forget it? The valley is here scarcely half a mile wide, while its northern wall of mainly naked perpendicular granite as at least 4,000 feet high, probably more. But the modicum of moonlight that fell into this awful gorge gave to that precipice a vagueness of outline, an indefinite vastness, a ghostly and weird spirituality. Had the mountain spoken to me in an audible voice or began to lean over with the purpose of burying me beneath its crushing mass, I should have hardly been surprised. Its whiteness, thrown into bold relief by the patches of trees or shrubs which fringed or flecked it, wherever a few handfuls of its moss, slowly decomposed to earth, could contrive to hold on, continually suggested the presence of snow, which suggestion with difficulty refuted was at once renewed. And looking up the valley, we saw just such mountain precipices, barely separated by intervening water courses, mainly dry at this season, of inconsiderable depth and only receding sufficiently to make room for a very narrow meadow enclosing the river to the furthest limit of vision. We discussed the propriety of camping directly at the foot of the pass, but decided against it because of the inadequacy of the grass at this point for our tired, hungry beasts, and resolved to push on to the nearest of the two houses in the valley, which was said to be 4 miles distant. To my dying day, I shall remember that weary, interminable ride up the valley. We had been on foot since daylight. It was now past midnight. We were all nearly used up, and I in torture from over 12 hours of steady riding on the hardest trotting horse in America. Yet we pressed on, through clumps of trees and bits of forest and patches of meadow, and over hillocks and mountain debris, mainly granite boulders of every size, often nearly as round as cannonballs, forming all but perpendicular banks to the capricious torrent that brought them hither, those stupendous precipices on either side glaring down upon us all the while. How many times our heavy eyes, I mean those of my San Francisco friend and my own, were lighted up by visions of that intensely desired cabin, visions which seemed distinct and unmistakable, but which, alas, a nearer view proved to be made up of moonlight and shadow, rock and trees, into which they faded one after another. It seemed at length that we should never reach the cabin, and my wavering mind recalls elfish German stories of the wild huntsman and of men who, having accepted invitations to a midnight chase, found on their return that the chase had been prolonged till all their relatives and friends were gone, and no one could be induced to recognize or recollect them. Gladly could I have thrown myself recklessly from the saddle and lain where I fell till morning, but this would never answer, and we kept steadily on. At length, the real cabin, one made of posts and beams and whipsawed boards instead of rock and shadow and moonshine, was reached, and we all eagerly dismounted, turning out our weary steeds into abundant grass, and stirring up the astonished landlord, who had never before received guests at that unseemly hour. It was after 1 a.m. He made us welcome, however, to his best accommodations, which would have found us lenient critics even had they been worse, and I crept into my rude but clean bed so soon as possible, while the rest awaited the preparation of some refreshment for the inner man. There was never a dainty that could have tempted me to eat at that hour. I am told that none ever before traveled from Bear Valley to the Yosemite in one day. I am confident no greenhorns ever did. The distance can hardly exceed 30 miles by an airline, but only a bird could traverse that line, while by way of Mariposa and the South Fork it must be fully 60 miles with a rise and fall of not less than 20,000 feet. The fall of the Yosemite, so called, is a humbug. It is not the Merced River that makes this fall, but a mere tributary trout brook which pitches in from the north by a barely once broken descent of 2,600 feet, while the Merced enters the valley at its eastern extremity over falls of 600 and 250 feet. But a river thrice as large as the Merced at this season would be utterly dwarfed by all the other accessories of this prodigious chasm. Only a Mississippi or a Niagara could be adequate to their exactions. I readily concede that 100 times the present amount of water may roll down the Yosemite Fall in the months of May and June, when the snows are melting from the central ranges of the Sierra Nevada, which bound this abyss on the east. But this would not add a fraction to the wonder of this vivid exemplification of the divine power and majesty. At present, the little stream that leaps down the Yosemite and is all but shattered to mist by the amazing descent looks like a tape line let down from the cloud-capped height to measure the depth of the abyss. The Yosemite Valley or gorge is the most unique and majestic of nature's marvels, but the Yosemite Fall is of little account. Were it absent, the valley would not be perceptibly less worthy of a fatiguing visit. And so, my friends, I think we're going to stop here. He has made it through to the Yosemite Valley and has crawled into bed, and we'll pick this up another time. So thank you for letting me share this with you as we took an adventure, right? We now know what it was like to try to ride on horseback through to Yosemite from Stockton. I'm glad we got to have an astral adventure together. So I wish you sweet dreams, and the angels and I are sending you so much love. You rest well, beautiful friend. I am deeply grateful for you, and we'll talk again soon. Blessings. Thank you.